Hey everyone, it's Ride1940 here. Today we're checking out Enigma's Cold War server in the MIA tip. Unlike our last tip video on the server, today we're loading out our weapons pylons to bring some more firepower with us. And it's been a while since I've made a DCS video, so let's not waste more time and get right into it. It's almost been a year since I've made some DCS content, and getting back into it over the past few days I've had to relearn the startup for the hip. It's not too hard, but it's just getting back into the groove of things that takes a little bit of time. I've also done a lot of practice landings offline before venturing back into my favorite DCS server, and that of course is this one, Enigma's Cold War server. I absolutely love the PvP interactions with a large number of players, so before we take off, let's see what's going on elsewhere. Since the server just restarted, all the jets are coming to life at the same time at their respective airfields. Here at Vody, a flight of MiG-21s are starting up and making their way to the active runway. Likewise, at Maykopkanskaya, F-86's taxi with the Recon Viggen in tow. We will see the same Viggen later on in our sortie. The goal of the sortie is to do as many troop drops as possible. At the moment, enemy encampment locations are unknown to me, but this map shows the route we'll end up taking. Unveiling enemy encampments is what this unarmed Viggen is doing high and fast above the front line. The FAQ for the server outlines the parameters in which an unarmed Viggen or MiG-21 can fly to do reconnaissance for the benefit of their own side. Reconnaissance may be performed at high or low altitudes, with or without the use of countermeasures and jammer pods. As weapons are not allowed, this includes the main internal cannon. Most pilots are keen to accomplish this task as fast as possible. As I was flying this live, this reconnaissance Viggen sent a very violent sonic boom overhead, and I was unaware if it was an active fighter jet, so I altered my flight path and continued to hug the trees. Our new heading will put us on a collision course to our first enemy encampment. After our very inaccurate rocket attack, we peel away from the enemy ground forces and attempt to find a spot with cover to insert our airborne troops. During our opening rocket attack, enemy ground fire blows out both rear main landing gear tires. Fortunately, the damage is not noticeable during our landing, and we're able to find some cover for our troops. Since I've been gone, the server has changed how troop insertions are completed. In the past, a helicopter would have one load of troops, and when that was complete, the helicopter would need to travel back to a friendly base to embark more ground forces to deploy. I was so happy to see that helicopters are able now to deploy ground forces and recover them for additional air assaults. Once troops are deployed, 3 minutes will count down, and at the end of that, if an enemy encampment is within 3 kilometers, they will be destroyed. You'll then be able to pick up those friendly ground forces and in a 5-minute window to redeploy elsewhere. For this attack, I opted to stay on the ground with my troops until the countdown was over. For this next camera shot, you're able to see how close we were to the enemy camp, and I was afraid of getting shot at not only by the camp, but by the large amount of aircraft circling above. To my surprise, that giant furball of aircraft I see nearby is not two collections of opposing aerial forces, but rather a single L-39 fighting against multiple Sabres, F-5s, and F-1s. The valiant fighting by the L-39 ties up the enemy fighters so that I may close on the exfiltration location and recover my deployed airborne troops. Without such a distraction, I undoubtedly would have been unable to close the gap and pick up my troops unscathed. Not long after we leave our first target area, I spot an F-5 coming straight at me, and thankfully it passes overhead without altering course. I was able to watch its shadow flash across in front of my cockpit. Typically, I would not change my heading if I felt I was in plain view of an aircraft, with the idea being additional movement would cause them to take notice. But when aircraft do pass over, I will almost always alter my course in case they notice me and were starting a turn to head back to where they thought I was. This has definitely saved me more often than not in the past. After a little bit of travel, we finally spot our next target, which is a group of bunkers off in the distance to our 1 to 2 o'clock position. You'll recall the Vigans early on doing reconnaissance sorties, and it absolutely helps when recon is done, especially for the helicopter crews. Without it, we're limited in our ability to spot enemy encampments, because it's an absolute death sentence to fly at any altitude above the treetops to try and scout targets at range. So my hat's off to those jet pilots who do it. Now the server does have recon troop insertions, and we may try that one of these days, but in terms of efficiency, recon by high altitude speed runs seems the best bet. After the absolute chaos in the skies above our last troop insertion, this one, as it happened live, seemed completely tame in comparison. When I was coming in for this drop, I did not notice any aircraft around me. The whole time I'm flying, I try as best as possible to look out for enemy threats, and in the hip, it's sometimes not easy to do. Unfortunately for me, I've landed my hip in an open field where I thought I was safe from the line of sight of the bunkers and completely missed the A-10 flying right at me. Luckily for me, the A-10 and its companion both miss me completely, and I'm able to escape to the west as I wait for the airborne assault timer to elapse. If the skies aren't crowded in my immediate vicinity, I'll opt to drop troops in and then loiter a few miles away in a circular pattern. This accomplishes a few things. I keep my speed up, and I'm able to constantly monitor the target area for any potential increase in enemy air activity before deciding to go back in or not for the troop exfiltration. Once the ground encampment explodes and green flares from your troops start popping off, you better believe you've gained the interest of any nearby pilot. One of the takeaways from this sortie that I'll work to improve is my collective pull. On this exfil and the one before it, I have sagged on takeoff because I've pulled too much collective too quickly, which ultimately causes the main rotor RPM to drop momentarily. I've been getting used to flying the hip with no pylons and the associated armament, so I think it's just something I'll have to remind myself that I'm actually a bit heavier than what I've grown accustomed to. As we scout for our next enemy encampment, the A-10 who flew over us at the last target area is off in the distance. I keep my eye on them as we continue to maneuver among the treetops, and it's not long until we cross paths with some enemy vehicles. This final troop insert was a little dangerous. We received some enemy ground fire from heavy caliber weapons, but our guys got it done in the end. That means at this point it all goes pear-shaped. Once my troops are loaded after the successful attack, I start to take off. I then notice some messaging saying I'm going too fast. In the moment, I wonder if the troop exfil happened too quickly and they all weren't loaded. This wasn't the case. As I lifted off, another troop drop was automatically triggered, and as I began to fly away, that is why I was being told I was going too fast. Once I land, the troops automatically deployed, so now I'm forced to fly around for 3 minutes until they state they found nothing. As I come into land, I'm a little too hot, and I collapse the front landing gear. I still try to retrieve the troops, and I notice they're not loading into my aircraft. In the process of trying to get closer to the troops, I accidentally collide with one of them and kill them. At this point, I cut my losses, and we leave without them. As we race back to our FARP, another aerial battle is taking place not too far off in the distance. Unfortunately, this MiG-21, which we spotted originally at Minerali Vodi, falls prey to a Viggen. As the air battle dies down behind us now, we continue onward for another 20 nautical miles back to our home base. This evening, blue outnumbered red 2-1, and the FARP was just as empty as when we departed almost an hour before. What I didn't do was take a quick look around the FARP on my approach. I've taken for granted a well-populated FARP and the security that comes with the constant coming and going of other helicopters. They are able to alert you to threats that pop up and even fight them off. As for this lone approach, I have to admit I was a little careless. All in all, this was a wonderful return back into DCS, and I loved finally trying out all the changes that were made to Enigma's Cold War server over the past year. Our hip is certainly looking a little worse for wear than when we took off about an hour ago, but I'm happy despite the damage we were able to return the helicopter and not lose any attrition points. Over the course of the sortie, we destroyed 3 enemy concentrations, and it was such a blast doing that with the same airborne troops and not having to shuttle back and forth 3 times. Well, that's going to be it for me, but before I go, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Out of the red helicopters, do you prefer the Hip or the Hind? I have a feeling it's probably the Hind, but anywho, if you're on the server and you see Rowdy1940, say hi and we'll see you all next time. Bye!